Professor of Flute and Director of Graduate Studies in the School of Music. He received his Doctor of Musical Arts from the University of Cincinnati Conservatory of Music in 2003 and a Master's of Music in Flute Performance from Michigan State in 1997. Chris is a performer in the Faculty Woodwind Quintet and also the founder and performer with the Sapphire Winds Chamber Ensemble that specializes in performing and recording wind music. During his professional development leave, he prepared, recorded, edited, and released a flute recording called Four Prayers on an international music label. He also traveled to teach master classes and perform. His talk is titled Four Prayers, The Joys and Frustrations of Making a Traditional Classical Music Recording in a High-Tech World. Chris.
I do have a rudimentary PowerPoint, so I'll need just a second to, speaking of the high-tech world. Well, first, I have to say thank you, of course, for the professional development leave, and thank you for this event. I have to say it's a little intimidating to realize that I'm not the smartest person in the room, that the two people that came before me were talking about things that in one case were way over my head, and in another case now I'm going to have nightmares about Alan Dulles. I played the flute, and I made a CD, and I'm going to talk about that instead. So yes, I am very grateful for the opportunity, and a lot of things that I'm going to talk about wouldn't have happened without simply having the time. So what you see here is a picture of the finished product, and this is symbolic of the joy and the frustration. During the summer, for between 3 and 6 weeks, I'm on the faculty at Interlochen Arts Camp in northern Michigan, and have been for a few years now. And that's a matter of great pride for me because I'm also an alum. I graduated from the academy. I spent all 4 years of my high school time there. So we timed the release of the CD to be while I was at the camp on purpose because I wanted to have this great moment where I could walk into the bookstore at Interlochen and see my CD hanging on the rack with all the other faculty members. And I achieved that. Obviously, the day that it happened, which was August 4th, I went and took a picture and sent it to all my friends, posted it on Facebook and so forth. And it has the stickers on it. It's highly symbolic and it's one of the joys. But on the frustrating side, it began to, as Eric was saying, poke holes. The retail manager of the store, when I approached him and said, hey, I'm a faculty member, I would like to sell my CD here, he said, well, we don't really do that much anymore, or we won't do it as a wholesale retail operation. In other words, they wouldn't buy several CDs from me and then retail them. They said, it doesn't matter who you are, and there's some very famous musicians on the faculty there who have CDs hanging on that wall. It doesn't matter who you are, those are not selling, so we lose money. So he said, if you're willing to donate, which of course was my plan all along, if you're willing to donate your CDs to us, we'll sell them and we'll keep all the money. And I said, well, that's fine. But it set off a little alarm in my brain. And I thought, well, you keep hearing about the end of the classical music recording business or the changes and all these things. And I'd always sort of let that wash right over me without thinking about it too much. Then a couple days after this, my students were in a chamber music concert. And afterwards, I took them to ice cream. And the ice cream stand is right next to the bookstore. So I was sitting out in front of the bookstore. Literally, the door was about as far away as that speaker with my students, and I just purchased them ice cream, so I figured that was the time to ask them if they'd noticed my CD and if they were going to go in there and buy it before the end of camp, which was in about a day or so, and I gently prodded. And I have very good rapport with these students. They are usually all-state band, all-state orchestra quality from across the United States. Some of them are very intelligent as well. A couple of them were going to pre-med in Columbia and things like that. And they were uncomfortable with the conversation. They got kind of quiet. And so I gently prodded further. And finally, one of them spoke up and said, nobody buys CDs anymore. And I thought, well, yeah, I mean, we are well aware of that. In this whole process, we also put this out on Amazon and iTunes and some digital formats that I'll get to in a little while. But it really hit home. And so I prodded a little further. And I said, well, why not? Because for somebody like me, there's a certain visceral satisfaction of going to a store and picking this up and looking at it and knowing that an artist that I admire has spent a lot of time putting something together, and knowing that all the artwork and the program notes and everything is an integral part of the experience. I just didn't understand where they were coming from, so I kept prodding a little further. One of them finally said, well, Dr. Chaffee, I've never had a CD player. I don't have a way to play CDs. And I said, well, what about your computer? And they said, they don't make those anymore. Not computers, but they don't make disk drives on computers anymore. And I thought, okay. So long story short with that, basically, I found out that in their minds, these are 16, 17, 18-year-olds, in their minds, music only exists on YouTube. Music only exists on digital platforms. And I had a tough time getting past that conversation and trying to gently prod them into thinking that there's a lot that goes into making a CD. There's a lot that goes into what they see when they see this finished product, whether it's an actual CD or whether they're on Amazon looking at the digital version or anywhere else looking at the digital version, that if they had ideas of being a performing artist like me when they grow up, someday they'd understand that they might even depend on that income. And that might be an integral part of their career is selling things. And I guess the joy for me is that in the back of my mind, I can always realize that I don't have to sell this. And that's one of the larger points of this presentation, is that I realized at some point this was not a commercial venture whatsoever. I realized I was probably going to be forever in debt to make this, despite the fact that I had a very generous grant from the College of Liberal Arts, and despite the fact that I had backing from a label, which is a rare circumstance. Usually labels ask you to pay money up front, but this one said, we'll cover your costs. I just realized that it was strictly commercial, or strictly not a commercial venture, and strictly just creative and scholarly work for me, than something that I was giving to future generations, something that other flutists could listen to. There's 2 brand new pieces on here, so it was helping out composers. So it became research with a capital R, in other words. I don't know about art with a capital A, and it certainly wasn't money with a capital M, but it was research with a capital R. So I just want to show you some of the things here. This is Schuster Hall right here at Wright State. This is October 29th of 2014. And this, or 2014, sorry. And this was during the professional development leave year for me. What you see here are some musicians and Schuster Hall stage. What I see here, to begin with, dollar signs. To break it down a little bit for you, for instance, there's a Steinway piano there which belongs to the school, but it sees very heavy use, constantly being used for different things. So in the grant that I wrote for this CD originally, I actually put money in there for a piano technician. And those do not come cheap. I brought in a Steinway certified technician, and I paid him a little extra because he had to be there at 8 in the morning to get the piano ready for my session. And then he was generous enough to sort of stay around, knowing that I'd be calling him at various points during the day. So he scheduled his time so that he was within a 10-mile radius and was, in fact, willing to come over and fix some tiny little things. And there's lots of other things in that picture that you see. The composer of the piece that we're recording is turning pages. I flew him in from North Carolina for the session so he could help produce and listen and be a part of it. The pianist is a longtime friend of mine. We went to school together. He was the best man at my wedding. There's a variety of reasons why I wanted him to be my collaborator, but I knew full well he wasn't just going to do this for free. So I had to write him into the grant as well. There's equipment. There's a lot of other things that you see. The microphone that you don't see very well that's hanging over my head is, to get technical for a second, a Telefunken ED250, something like that. What it is a 1970s vintage tube microphone. It operates on vacuum technology with a condenser. So the tube itself takes an hour to warm up to where it's really ready to record. What's amazing about this process, one of the things I learned is that everything old is new again, that a lot of the digital recording technology is being thrown away or used for low quality recording. For high quality recording, they're actually going back to old tube microphones and RCA microphones and things that were made in the 60s. These things circulate on eBay for very, very high prices. So, and it's connected to a condenser, which is connected to another device, which is connected to a computer. And behind that computer is a sound engineer. I had to pay his travel from Ann Arbor to here. I had to pay for a hotel, had to pay for his time. Just to have him walk in the door was $500, to give you some idea what we're talking about. And that's for one session. Thankfully, he didn't charge by the hour. He charged a flat fee because I knew him. So you add it all together, and it just becomes, the investment becomes incredible, just in terms of the sheer dollar amount. And that's why when you look at something like this, and somebody is not buying it, or it's being copied and pirated and so forth and so on, it's, in a way, it's of course the grand frustration with this is that you know full well that what goes into this. And this was just one session. We did 2 different sessions, one in October and one in January, and we set aside one to just record one single piece because of its complexity. And then the part that, of course, matters to me more, other than the money, which I knew was going to be an issue going in, the preparation. What you don't see is that in the month of October, thanks to the PDL, I had time to, and this is a verb as a musician, practice. I had time to set aside big blocks of time, huge amounts of time compared to my normal schedule, to really dig in, develop some practice routines, develop some things to get ready for this. Because even with all the technology that's available, with everything that a good engineer can do in Pro Tools with a computer, it has to be performance quality. As to be graphic, my recording engineer often says, you can't polish a turd. You can't go in there and play terribly and expect somebody to be able to fix that with a computer. It has to be of the highest quality. And what's exhausting about it, of course, is that it has to be of the highest quality over and over and over again. And there's a process at work here where basically we played the entire piece movement by movement in entire takes, and then went back and recorded different sections and got multiple takes of different places just to be satisfied with individual parts, and then edited it into a master take. And that's true of any classical recording, by the way. You hardly ever hear something that goes start to finish. It's always kind of a pastiche of the best possible worlds. But even there, if you make one wrong note or one mistake in one thing and you go back and try and fix it, you can't play wrong notes elsewhere. You have to keep nailing it over and over and over again. So the month of October was a wonderful month for me because I had a week where I traveled and did some teaching and playing, and actually played this piece in recital. So I had a sort of more momentum going into the recording session, but it provided me this wonderful opportunity to get this done and to get into the process. And as a net result, I'm very happy to say by the time we got everything this day, everything lined up and ready to go, we started recording at about 10. I was at the Yellow Springs Brewery by 3:30. We actually got the piece done by about 2. And it was a testament to the hard work that we put into that, and the rehearsals, and again, all that time, all that investment beyond the money, just the amount of time that we prepared just to get one thing done. So again, it goes back to that idea that I didn't do this in particular, and in this piece in particular, I did not do for any other reason other than I wanted to share it with other musicians. I wanted to get it down in a very polished way. It's, one other thing that I could say about this in terms of an investment is that in 2005, actually Herb DeGala invited me to play on a Dayton Chamber Music Series concert, which paid a little bit, and I turned around and used that money to ask this composer to write a piece. And he wrote a very short piece, which became a larger piece, so it became something that we recorded in its entirety right here. So this is a project that has been brewing, I guess, for 10 years or so, and again, it represents an investment beyond just this one day and all those things that go in there. So that's a lot about the process. I wanted to show you the result. This actually ended up, if you have the CD, the person who did the art for me first got this picture and thought it was funny. And he put it in the liner itself. He put it in where the CD tray is. And when he sent me the first proof, this was a joke. And I thought, oh, okay. But after a while, it began to represent what we were all about here. And it's a joke in a way, but it is the result. And this is just corpse pose. This is just me in between takes. Everybody else left the room, so I thought I was alone. So I just sort of let myself go on the stage. The engineer snuck in with his camera and took that picture, and I didn't know about it until he sent it to me a couple days after the fact. But so the result was we are also able to release this through several different digital platforms. One of them is through Bandcamp, which is a wonderful new service where there's no middleman. This is available on Amazon. This is available on iTunes. As a result, it's available in ways that I'm not even aware of. Since it's available through iTunes, it's on Apple Music. So if you play it through Apple Music and you play it apparently more than 3 times, it'll start popping up in your rotation if you do it on a miscellaneous shuffle and things like that. There's a lot of ways that we cannot figure out how music is disseminated digitally. I didn't even get into facts and figures about how classical music is 3% of recorded music sales. And that still represents somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 million or so, but still overall it's a tiny little drop. And something like my record, I kept calling it a tiny pebble in a vast ocean. But we were able to put it on Bandcamp, and we got to this point where the art is available, the CD is available, you can actually listen to bits of it, you can play chunks of it, you can actually play track by track, which in itself is a little bit self-defeating. It's meant that you can play each track once and hear it, but somebody could legitimately listen to the entire album and go, okay, oh, I heard it, and that's the end of that. So it's not perfect in that way either. But so this is, in a way, the thing that I'm most proud of is that we created a digital version which is widely available, and available if you purchase it through an enhanced format called FLAC, which is a digital file. This is something that I learned about as well. I knew all along that when you record something in studio quality, the spectrum that you hear is here. When you put it onto CD, you lose some of that. When you put it on LP, you retain that. And by the way, speaking of expensive, LPs were part of the design. I don't have those, we'll just say. You put it on CD, the quality diminishes. You put it on MP3, you're slicing it way down. And what's worse, of course, you take MP3, you play it through really terrible speakers on a computer, or you play it through really bad headphones. You've gone from here to here, so you're not hearing all the work that I put into it. You're not hearing the results of those expensive microphones and those hours of rehearsals. You're only getting a small slice of that. And the FLAC format actually is a digital format that you can purchase. You have to have a separate player for, but you can actually get better than CD quality in the digital world now. Now, the frustration, just to summarize with that, is, of course, letting people know. When you don't have a vast budget for marketing and when you have so many things to compete with, and again, you are a small percentage of that 3% of the larger recording industry, you begin to give up on the idea that you're a commercial part of the enterprise. You just are happy to know that you recorded some cool music and that other people can hear it. So I'm getting the sign that I'm almost done here. I wanted to just play real quick if it'll play. This, unfortunately, will be MP3. You have to purchase it to get the FLAC. This is the track that was recorded in the picture that you saw. I'll just start it so that you can hear it. I hope. One of the frustrations of the digital world, of course, is the little spinning circle of doom that we all get. Well, it also takes robust internet connection, which we may not have, and that's fine. I wasn't fully expecting that. I was actually kind of secretly hoping this would happen, because I'm old school enough to say that this, unless the power is off or unless there's something wrong or malfunctioning in your system, you can still pick one of these up and play it. And I do. Well, I'm out of time, unfortunately. So. unless I go into the question period. But yes, so I'll just let that spin. Are there any questions?
Yes, what are the four prayers? And why the title?
Yeah, I avoided talking about that part. The Four Prayers, it's one of the pieces on the CD. The piece closes with a piece entitled Four Prayers, and a composer, American named Ned Rorem. It's not one of the new pieces. It's something that somebody else has recorded. Actually, several other people have recorded. I debated whether I even wanted to do it because it's not a terribly original contribution, other than, of course, this is my version. But it's a deeply personal piece for me, and I just decided I wanted to tack it on the end of the album. It ends quietly, so it's a statement in itself. I don't play the fastest, hardest piece at the beginning and end. I end very quietly. I kind of go out with a whimper, if you will, on this. So the title was one of the hardest parts of the project. I think a month and a half went by where I was bugging all of my friends trying to run ideas around and figure out what would be indicative or personal, all those things. And it just sort of popped up one day. So I'll just name it after one of the pieces, which is common practice. And, you'll see things that just says Beethoven Symphony Number 3, and the disc has all kinds of Beethoven on it, but that ends up to be the title. So it's in keeping with classical music as well. Yeah.
Chris, knowing nothing about recording, I'm just curious because my assumption is you would record in a recording studio rather than in the concert hall. So could you just talk a little bit about that and what's the advantages?
Well, in essence, we made Schuster Hall a recording studio. We sealed the doors. I had my students put up signs. One of them I meant to put that in the PowerPoint, but one of them got all creative and put pictures of Gandalf all around the doors saying, "Thou shalt not pass," knowing full well that I would get very angry if somebody barged in while I was playing. But we locked down the hall, and Schuster itself is very soundproof. So we were very fortunate to be able to kind of get in the bubble. In that recording session, in January, we actually stopped a few times for construction noise. They were redoing the bathroom on the other side of the wall, and I have in the raw recording material, this jackhammering sound kept coming in. And we knew that was the case, and we just kind of went with it. But Schuster itself records very well. My engineer was extremely pleased because he didn't have to fuss with too many things in terms of levels and things. The raw sound of a good microphone in that hall is actually world class. Actually, it's very, very good. So knowing that going in was very helpful. That's one of the best parts of this too, is that as a faculty member here, all I had to do is sign my name on a piece of paper and I could use that hall. Whereas if I went to another university and or an actual recording studio, there'd be additional investment as well. So, but yeah, even though it was in the hall, it was meant to be in more of a studio-like environment. So, yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Would you ever do it again?
Well, yes, I think so. When I first started doing this, I wasn't sure I wanted to begin with, because there's so much that I had to leave out because of time today. Just the idea of even coming to the point where I wanted to do this, knowing full well that it wouldn't sell very many copies, and knowing full well, again, that I was a tiny little pebble in a vast, vast ocean of music and information. Some of you may remember Wright State was actually one of the first universities to sign up with iTunes U in 2006, 2007, thereabouts. There were 20 or so schools that jumped into iTunes U when it was first launched, and we were one of those. And back then, I recorded a live recital, and licensing and all those things, I just kind of pretended I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to do this, but I took that live recital and just slapped it right up there in iTunes U. In a part because live is so much more interesting too, because of the manufactured nature of a studio recording and how you can actually, record it until you get it right. The live recording had blemishes like crazy, lots of wrong notes, missed entrances, it's sloppy as all, but it is what it is. So for a while I thought that that's what I wanted to do, is leave a trail like that out there in my professional career. But I came around to the idea that I wanted to do this, in part because the record label is run by a friend of mine, and he kept telling me it would be something I could leave for my children. that someday when I wasn't around, they'd have something tangible to hang on to that represented who I was as a musician and a person. And that's what kind of pushed me over the edge. I think, yeah, short answer is yes in the long run, if the right opportunity comes up. I'm recording chamber music stuff like crazy right now that's going to be out in a year or so. And I have offers to work on a solo project. So it's like Eric's thing, though. It's not, you can't just knock it together in 6 months. It takes a long time to get all the bits and pieces together. So, yes, sir.
As a copyright holder, copyright is really a big thing, especially with music and movies. Some people, some albums or some music industries would believe that if I was to buy your CD, I wouldn't own that music. I'm actually just renting it. How do you feel about that?
Well, that was another part of the investment that I should have listed, was that in order to put this on the market with a UPC code, like you see on the back, I had to register with an agency in New York and pay licensing. And since there are 3 of these are living composers, in 2 out of the 3, they wanted money up front for the licensing. So the label was able to write a check and just say, okay, based on anticipated sales, they wrote a check which released the rights to me to just put it out there. But technically, in that case, it's owned by the composer. So, yeah, I'm selling licenses to music, not necessarily the music itself. Which, that raises the issue with YouTube and all these other platforms where there's nothing to prevent me from having one of my students put this entire album up on YouTube. And we can keep striking it, but if enough people do, it's eventually just going to seep out there. And the net result is none of us get the money. And I keep going back to that point, but I'm okay with that because I did this in part for the composers. There's two friends of mine on this that are prominent composers, and I was so glad to be able to put their music out there. If somebody hears it for free and likes it and then goes and plays it, it has some desired effect. But again, in the grand scheme of things, I have a patron, Wright State University. I have a day job, whereas a lot of musicians don't have that opportunity. I saw a concert last night, Imani Wind Quintet, and those guys, none of them have a stable year-round job. They live on their performances and recordings. So they would be a lot more adamant on their subject than I am. And they'd be a lot more pushy about, buy my CD, buy my CD. Oh, by the way, buy my CD. Oh, cool. Thanks.